Puppet Master across alternate timelines. Long before the puppets danced through direct-to-video obscurity, there were other versions, released in other timelines. In worlds not far from our own, Puppet Master 1, 2, and 3 were transformed into gothic love stories, psychic war dramas, and philosophical horror films. What you're about to see are not remakes, nor fan dreams. These are the alternate timeline echoes of films that were meant to be, but never were here. Welcome to the Vault of Forgotten Strings. Puppet Master, 1989. Alternate timeline variants. Across timelines, the first Puppet Master film is the origin node, and in several strands, it manifested in very different forms, especially in terms of tone, setting, and Toulon's morality. Alternate timeline variant A, Puppet Master, Strings of Vengeance. Release year, 1989. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand V5 Leon Spiral. Directed by Andrei Zulawski, replacing Dakota. Tone, surreal, existential horror. Setting, filmed in France. Premise, the puppets are fragments of Toulon's own broken psyche. Each represents a part of his guilt. Blade equals rage. Tunneler equals compulsion. Leechwoman equals failed intimacy. The film follows a psychic investigator who begins unraveling the truth of Toulon's suicide, only to realize she's his daughter in disguise. Point of divergence. Charles Band had a nervous breakdown in 1988 and partnered with European art horror producers. Full Moon became a prestige surrealist label. Impact. Universally praised in that world. Ends with the puppets turning on the viewer, a meta-horror fourth wall break. Alternate timeline variant B, Puppet Master, The Hanged Cabinet. Release year, 1989. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand R4- Kabbalist Cut. Written by David Scow and Clive Barker. Tone, Jewish mysticism themes. Toulon is a fallen golem maker. Premise, set in a post-World War I sanatorium in Prague. Toulon was once a sacred craftsman creating protective golems for orphans. But his final creation, Blade, is a corrupted defense sigil. The puppets kill not for revenge, but to consume the memories of their victims, feeding a forbidden thought form. Point of divergence. The script was originally sent to Barker before Dakota. Jewish folklore replaces the Nazi backstory entirely. Impact. Cult favorite in scholarly and esoteric horror circles. Regarded as the exorcist of its timeline. Alternate timeline variant C, Puppet Master, The Dancer's War. Release year, 1990. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand D8- Vienna Violet. Tone, ballet horror, puppets are war refugees' memories. Premise, a mute ballerina named Mariette inherits Toulon's trunk and discovers the puppets are possessed by the last thoughts of war victims. She begins using them in avant-garde performances to expose government's lies, but each dance brings the dead closer. Point of divergence. The script rights were sold to a rival film company in that timeline, who rewrote it. Visually lush, emotionally devastating. Impact. Pinhead is reimagined as a small child puppet holding a teddy bear, not a brute. The final ballet is infamous. The stage erupts into flame as Blade turns to ash mid-spin. Alternate timeline variant D, Puppet Master, The Paris Covenant. Release year, 1988. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand V2 Occult Noir. Tone, noir horror hybrid debut. Shot in black and white with red accents only. Premise, set in 1930s Paris, the puppets are living spiritual relics bound by a secret order. A detective investigates a string of impossible murders, each committed by hands too small to be human. Point of divergence. Charles Band originally pitched Puppet Master as an art horror anthology to Miramax. It was greenlit instead of shelved. Impact. Won cinematography awards in its timeline. Leechwoman redesign became iconic. Long braid of silk-stained worms. Now let's open Vault Segment 11. Puppet Master 2 and 3. Lost Timeline Variants. These films represent the psychic rupture point and historical memory twist that echo through every later installment. Notable variants of Puppet Master 2, 1990. Our Timeline's Part 2 ends with Camille trapped in a doll body and Toulon reanimated as a decaying ghoul, then abandoned narratively. But in several Echo timelines, this film becomes either a psychic horror classic, a romantic tragedy, or a ghost ritual initiation film. Alternate timeline variant A, Puppet Master 2, The Waxen Bride. Release year, 1990. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand H8 Romantic Golem Arc. Directed by Mary Lambert, Pet Sematary. Tone, tragic, gothic, melodramatic. Premise. Instead of chasing a new soul, Toulon attempts to rebuild his dead wife, pouring his memories into a waxen puppet form. Camille, still psychic, is drawn into the ritual and ends up sharing her soul with this false bride. The film blurs memory, grief, and identity as the two women begin to merge. Point of divergence. Focus was shifted early to romantic horror. Carolyn, from the original Part 2, was rewritten as a reincarnation figure. Impact. The film became a mourning ritual in its timeline, often watched by those who lost lovers. The final puppet was known as Marion, a silent bride of wax, with eyes that weep amber. Alternate timeline variant B, Puppet Master 2, Sanctum of Strings. Release year, 1991. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand F, 3- The Parapsychic Cut. Developed as a TV movie miniseries. A Camille-centric revision. Premise. Set largely inside the Bodega Bay Inn, Camille becomes the protagonist. The hotel itself is revealed to be a psychic amplifier, awakening her past life memories and binding the puppets to her against Toulon's will. Toulon is barely seen, a decaying voice behind the walls. The series ends with Camille merging with the inn and taking control of the puppet lore. Point of divergence. Full Moon tried a network horror anthology model. Camille was portrayed by a different actress with formal stage training. Impact. Considered the rose red of its timeline. Includes Silkman, a puppet that hides between sheets and mimics voices. Alternate timeline variant C, Puppet Master 2, The Reversal Formula. Release year, 1990. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand D6 Toulon's Fall. Alternate take where Toulon is the villain and Camille is his daughter. Premise. In this version, Camille knows Toulon is her estranged father, and she's come to stop him from using the soul extraction formula on living children. The puppets are divided, half loyal to Toulon, half to Camille. Jester splits into twins, one for each faction. Point of divergence. Studio aimed to make Camille the long-term lead and reposition Toulon as a tragic antagonist. Impact. Introduced Velveteen, a clockwork puppet powered by lullabies. Ends with Camille in the ruined theater where Toulon performed, addressing an empty stage of dolls. Notable variants of Puppet Master 3, 1991. In our timeline, Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge, is a well-received World War II prequel. But in Echo timelines, it became an origin myth, an occult espionage thriller, or a spiritual possession film. Alternate timeline Variant A, Puppet Master 3, The Clockmaker of Worms. Release year, 1991. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand T5 Alchemical Strain. Setting, set in pre-Nazi Berlin. Directed by Werner Herzog. Yes, really. Premise. Toulon is reimagined as a pacifist clockmaker whose puppets become ritual protectors against a rising wave of techno-occultists. The Nazis aren't just villains, they're reality hackers trying to harness memory as a weapon. The puppets whisper lines from Goethe and Rilke. Point of divergence. A German co-producer insisted on making it a poetic anti-war piece. Herzog was brought in to reframe Toulon as a philosopher of time. Impact. Won Best Cinematography at that timeline's Echo Venice. Tunneler is renamed Heimat, and drills not flesh but walls of silence. Alternate timeline Variant B, Puppet Master 3, Blutkrieg. Release year, 1991. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand R9 Combat Horror Line. Adapted into a Wolfenstein-style PC game in 1992. Premise, a bloodier, pulpy reboot of the series. Toulon is executed in Act 1, and the puppets become vigilante assassins working with resistance fighters. New puppet Brassjaw, a German shepherd skull with harmonica teeth, joins the cast. Think Inglourious Bastards meets Gremlins. Point of divergence. American audiences demanded more action after the slow burn of 2. Charles Band doubled down on gore plus revenge fantasy. Impact. The puppets fight human SS agents and resurrected Nazi test subjects. Very popular with Gen X horror fans. Soundtrack released on cassette. Alternate timeline Variant C, Puppet Master 3, The Reflection Code. Release year, 1992. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand Q2 Soul Divided Canon. Tone, psychological horror instead of action. Premise, the formula begins copying parts of Toulon's soul into the puppets, but they start gaining his guilt, trauma, and love, fracturing into versions of him. Toulon spirals into a crisis as each puppet reflects a part of himself he wants to forget. Point of divergence. Inspired by early drafts that viewed Blade as Toulon's rage personified. Psychological horror was rising in prestige, post-Jacob's Ladder effect. Impact. Ends with Toulon placing a mask over his face and becoming a puppet himself. Considered the Synecdoche, New York of Puppet Master in that timeline. Camille, The psychic puppet successor timelines. Camille, the powerful psychic woman from Puppet Master 2, 1990, ends the film trapped inside a porcelain doll. In our timeline, this was a tragic ending and largely dropped. But in others, she became the new Toulon. Alternate timeline Camille sequel A, Puppet Master 3, House of Camille. Release year, 1992. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand N2, Succession Arc. Tone, tragic horror, female protagonist. Directed by Mary Lambert, Pet Sematary. Premise: the film opens immediately after Part 2. Camille, now trapped in the doll body, sets out to master the formula herself, not to create killers, but to give voices back to the voiceless. She builds new puppets from orphans' keepsakes, haunted by dreams of Toulon. Point of divergence. Part 2 was a success, and Full Moon experimented with matriarchal horror. Mary Lambert offered a trilogy treatment, with only this film realized. Impact introduced the puppet Glass Boy, a child's spirit in a see-through marionette body filled with swirling fog. The film ends with Camille addressing the camera. They called him a master, but they buried his guilt. I'm no master. I'm memory. Alternate timeline Camille. Sequel B, Camille's War, Puppet Master 6. Release year, 1998. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand E3, Shadow Revolt. Also released as FMV horror game in that world. Premise: Camille leads her own faction of puppets in a war against a dark clone of Toulon, resurrected by corporate necromancers trying to weaponize the puppets. It's a fast-paced film set in modern-day Vienna, with haunting flashbacks to World War I hospitals. Point of divergence. Toulon becomes an antagonist figure. Camille is reimagined as a quiet revolutionary, not a victim. Impact. Torch is destroyed by Camille in a scene that made audiences cry. Jester switches sides mid-battle and kneels before Camille's puppet throne. Alternate timeline Camille. Sequel C, Puppet Master, The White Marionette. Release year, 1994. Alternate timeline, Echo Strand F7, Psychic Lineage. Directed by Guillermo del Toro. Premise: the porcelain body Camille occupies slowly absorbs her soul, fusing her with centuries of European doll magic. She becomes something not quite alive, not quite dead. The puppets no longer serve, they remember. The film is lyrical, symbolic, and full of mirrors. Impact. Del Toro's dreamlike horror fuses the devil's backbone and Puppet Master aesthetics. Final shot. Camille, now faded, whispers her real name, and the puppets fall still forever. Each timeline told a different story. Camille's ascension, Toulon's unraveling, a hotel that remembers the dead. Somewhere out there, these films still flicker in projection booths of haunted cities. Until then, we remember for them. Subscribe for more journeys through the Echo Vault. And never trust a puppet that remembers too much.